I'm going to show you everything you need to know to master Destruction Warlock in Cataclysm Classic. Let's jump into it with which race to play. I would recommend, if you are Alliance, that you go with Worgen for two main reasons. One of them being the Dark Flight Racial, a 2-minute cooldown increasing your movement speed 40% for 10 seconds. The second one being Viciousness, simply increasing your critical strike chance by 1%. After that, if you are going Horde, you can go with either Troll or Orc. Orcs having a spell power cooldown, whereas Trolls have a berserking cooldown that actually increases your attack speed instead. Regarding the stats we're going to want, Intellect is going to reign king, increasing all of your spell power, mana pool, and critical strike together. Then, we're going to want to hit the hit cap rating, which for spells is going to be 17%, and after that we're going to get some haste. This is actually going to increase how quickly you can cast your spells, and also add extra ticks of damage to your dots, otherwise known as damage over time spells, which we do have a fair few of as a Warlock. Mastery is going to be after that, and lastly, Crit. Mastery is a new stat, and it is one of our weakest ones, Crit actually often being better than Mastery, but it really does depend on how much you have of each, and basically it's just going to increase the damage of our fire spells. Of course, it's no surprise most of our talents are going into the Destruction tree, seeming as we are Destruction Warlocks after all. Now, when I'm going through these talents and explaining what they do, if you do get a tad confused or anything, or don't understand the spells I'm explaining because maybe you're new to being a Warlock, don't worry. When we go through the rotation, I'm going to actually recap on how it all synergizes together, but this is going to give you a really good grounding and foundation into the talent tree first and why we're picking them, which is important. So starting off, we're putting 3 out of 3 into Bane, reducing the cast time of some of our spells by 0.5 seconds. We're also putting some into Shadow and Flame, increasing damage done by our Shadow Bolt and Incinerate. We're not going to be using Shadow Bolt, but we are going to be using Incinerate, and that's going to increase the damage by 12%. And when you use Incinerate, it's actually going to put the Shadow and Flame effect onto our target. That target is going to be afflicted by that debuff and therefore become vulnerable. It's going to increase our spell critical strike chance against the target by 5% for 30 seconds. We want to keep that up at all time when possible. After that, we're putting 2 out of 2 into Improved Immolate, simply increasing the damage it does. Then 2 out of 2 into Ember Storm, reducing the cast time of some of our spells again. Going down on more, Improved Soulfire, increasing your fire and shadow damage done by 8% for 20 seconds after you deal damage with Soulfire, and 3 out of 3 into Backdraft. When you cast Conflagrate, the cast time for your next 3 Shadow Bolts, Incinerate and Chaos Bolt spells is reduced by 30% for 15 seconds. Again, we're not going to be using Shadow Bolt, but we will be using the other 2. We have Shadow Burn. I'm going to talk through that more shortly. Same with Bane of Havoc and Chaos Bolt. Any abilities that we're getting from the rotation, I will speak through separately. So going down onto the next one, we have Burning Embers. Your Soulfire and your Imp's Firebolt cause a Burning Ember damage over time effect on the target equal to 15% of the damage done lasting 7 seconds. TLDR, mentioning imps here, if you're wondering which demon we are going to take as our minion as a Destruction Warlock, it is going to be the imp. So that is the minion that you will be using as Destruction. It is going to be the imp. So when the imp does its Firebolt, it's going to be putting a dot or damage over time onto our target. Then we have Soul Leech. Your Shadow Burn, Soulfire and Chaos Bolt instantly restore 4% of your total health and mana when they deal damage, and also grant replenishment. What does replenishment do? Grants up to 10 party and raid members mana regen equal to 1% of their maximum mana per 10 seconds for 15 seconds, which is fantastic for our healers and other spellcasters. We've got the Nether Ward here, transforming our Shadow Ward into a Nether Ward. You must be within Demon Armor or Fell Armor to occur the transformation. Basically, what does Nether Ward do? It absorbs spell damage. And we are going to be using our Fell Armor here as our armor, surrounding the cast with Fell Energy, increasing your spell damage, and also causes you to be healed by 3% of any single target spell damage that you do deal. Going down, we also have Nether Protection after that. When you absorb damage through Shadow Ward, Nether Ward or other effects, you gain Nether Protection, reducing all damage by that spell school by 30% for 12 seconds. Just some more survivability that we're going to be passively gaining there. Then we have Shadow Fury, something I see more of a utility spell, unleashing it, causing shadow damage and stunning enemies within 8 yards for 3 seconds. And lastly, Empowered Imp. Your Imp's Firebolt has a 4% chance to cause your next Soulfire spell to be instant cast within 8 seconds. Then we've got, like I said, Chaos Bolt and Bane of Havoc. More on that in the rotation part. Let's look at the final few talents we're putting in Demonology and also Affliction, starting with Improved Corruption, increasing the damage of our Corruption by 12%. This is another dot we're going to be using, or damage over time spell, that we're going to be keeping up on our targets at all times when possible. Then we have Dark Arts, reducing the cast time of our Imp's Firebolt by 0.75 seconds. And Fell Synergy. You have a 100% chance to heal your pet for 15% of the spell power done. And this is just really going to be improving the survivability of our Imp, which is going to massively impact our DPS. Lastly, 2 out of 2 into Mana Feed. When your Summoned Demon critically hits with a basic attack, you get some mana back. When you gain mana from Life Tap, your Summoned Demon gains a ton of mana as well. For the Glyphs we're taking, starting off with the Prime Glyphs, we're going to go with Immolate, increasing the damage, Imp, increasing the damage of our Imp's Fireball, and Conflagrate, reducing the cooldown on that spell. For Major, we're going with Life Tap, Soul Link, and Soulstone, which are more quality of life spells, as are our Ritual of Souls, Drain Soul, and Health Funnel. The prime ones are the ones that are really having an effect on our DPS, simply increasing the damage done by these spells and reducing the cooldown of Conflagrate. So how is it all going to come together into the actual rotation we will be using? Well, first things first, we want to apply this spell down here on the bottom right, Curse of the Elements. Causes the target for 5 minutes to be bearing this curse, reducing their resistances to all elements, and increasing magic damage taken by 8%. You're going to want to put this on the target and make sure that you're keeping it up at all times. Do be aware, however, Balanced Druids, Assassination Rogues, Unholy Death Knights, and obviously other Warlocks could be putting this on as well, meaning you may not need to. This top line here, although it looks complicated, is our single target rotation, and actually is quite straightforward. The first thing we're going to do is cast Soulfire, and that is our number 1 priority. You'll notice that we gain the buff when using it, Improved Soulfire. Shadow and fire damage is increased by 8%. So whenever we use Soulfire, we get that buff up. And we're only using Soulfire as our number 1 priority to make sure that we're keeping that Improved Soulfire buff up at all times. And then after that, now that we're doing our maximum amount of damage, we want to then put Immolate on the target, a fiery damage over time spell, keeping this up at all times as well. After that, we're going to put Corruption on the target, another dot or damage over time, and the same with Bane of Doom. However, this one is a bit more in depth. Bane's the target of Impending Doom, causing 7,000 shadow damage every 15 seconds. When Bane of Doom deals damage, it has a 20% chance to summon a Demon Guardian. Only one target can have one Bane on them at a time. And if you're wondering what I mean by that, well, we also have Bane of Havoc, meaning if you're up against 2 targets, we can put Bane of Doom on one and Bane of Havoc on the other. But more on that when we go through the AoE rotation. The next spell is going to be Conflagrate, and can you see here that I can't actually use it yet? Well, let's look at the tooltip and see why. Instantly deals fire damage equal to 60% of your Immolate's periodic damage on the target, meaning we are going to need Immolate to be up on our target to actually use Conflagrate, which you should be doing anyway, because as I've said, we're going to be keeping Immolate up at all time. And we are going to be using Conflagrate on cooldown. So just to recap so far, use your Soulfire to keep up the Improved Soulfire buff, keep up Immolate at all times, keep up Corruption and Bane of Doom, and use your Conflagrate on cooldown. After that, we're going to use our Shadow Flame, which basically does Shadow Flame damage in a cone in front of us. Try and be in the melee to use this, well, otherwise it won't hit. But if you can't get into melee for some reason, don't worry about it. After that, you can see Soulfire is on our action bar again. And we're only using it at this point. Remember using it at the start to keep up Improved Soulfire. We're only using it at this point when it's instant, which you can see when it lights up. And that is from the Empowered Imp talent that we took. Your Imp's Firebolt has a 4% chance to cause your next Soulfire spell to be instant cast within 8 seconds. So at this point in the priority list, that's when we're going to be using our instant Soulfires. If you're wondering why is it on here twice, that's why. You can obviously just have this on your action bar once if that's easier for you, or twice if it's easier to remember because of that. We're also going to use our Chaos Bolt on cooldown, and we're also going to use our Shadow Burn on cooldown. You can see that I can't use my Shadow Burn because it's only usable on enemies of 20% health or lower, instantly blasting the target for Shadow Flame damage. If the target dies, it's going to give us free Soul Shards. Only usable on enemies that have less than 20% health. And if we have nothing else to press, we're going to be using our Incinerate as our filler on the target. And that's pretty much it for the single target rotation. Regarding the multi-target rotation, let's say we have 2 targets. We're going to put Corruption and Immolate up, and then Bane of Doom on the first target. And on the second target, we're going to put Corruption and Immolate up, and then Bane of Havoc. So Bane of Doom on one, Bane of Havoc on the other. Then, after that, once we've got all of those dots up on both targets, we're just going to continue with our single target rotation on the primary target. If we have 3 or more targets, we're going to do something slightly different. The one that will live the longest we'll put on Bane of Havoc, and a second target we'll put Bane of Doom on. Again, with maintaining our Immolate and Corruption on as many targets as possible. After that, we can use our Shadow Flame and cooldown. Remember that it does do conal damage, therefore doing damage to anyone in front of us and can be used on multiple targets. Make sure to also keep up your improved Soulfire, as that is going to be increasing the damage you're doing to all of these mobs, remember. And after that, we're just going to use our Rain of Fire on them. So keep up the dots, keep up your Banes, use your Shadow Flame, Conal, and then just rain down Hellfire upon them. We should also look at some of the cooldowns we're going to be using, which is going to be Demon Soul and Summon Doomguard. You can have a Doomguard or an Infernal. Here is the Doomguard. I would recommend using the Doomguard for single target and the Infernal Demon for AoE. And we also have our Demon Soul. It's a huge tooltip, but basically it's going to do something different depending on which demon you have out. We will of course have our Imp out, and if we look at what that means, critical strike chance of your cast time, destruction spells is increased by 30% for 20 seconds. If you're wondering what it means by cast time, it means any spell that isn't instant cast. So things like our Immolate would be, our Corruption wouldn't, as that is an instant cast. Conflagrate wouldn't, because it's instant cast, etc. I'm not actually sure if it works on Soulfire when it's instant or not. That's actually really interesting. It should work, because it's not technically a instant spell, but I'm not sure. Actually, the one thing I'm not sure on, which doesn't happen often. Lastly, we have Dark Intent, which basically you can use to increase the damage and haste done of another party or raid member. I would advise putting this on either the highest DPS caster or a Shadow Priest if there is one in the raid group. Apart from that, we have a few utilities like creating Soul Stones and Health Stones, etc., and more in our spellbook. But that is the main rotation for the spec. Regarding the consumables we're going to be using, first of all, for your enchants, you will actually need some reputation, as you can see above with Hyjal and Pharazane. Pharazane does actually have a revered version of these, should you have not gotten to Exalted yet. Regarding your gems, I would advise the Brilliant Inferno Ruby in the red slot, the Reckless Ember Topaz in the yellow slot, adding Intellect and Haste, and a Purified Demon's Eye, adding Intellect and Spirit, or the hit rating one as well if you haven't gotten to your hit yet. Burning Shadow Spirit Diamond is the meta gem, and regarding professions, I always advise to go for tailoring and enchanting. Tailoring because you can make your own armor, of course, and also for the spell enchant on your cloak, giving you a chance to add spell power for 15 seconds. The rings on enchanting can be enchanted, funny that, but with spell power on both rings, not just one, for 23 spell power each, turning out to be 46 spell power. And no, if you remove enchanting, you cannot take the enchants with you. Enchant Weapon Power Torrent is the main one you're going to want on your weapon, giving you a chance to increase intellect by 500 for 12 seconds. And on the consumables, we should be using the Flask of the Draconic Mind for intellect, the Volcanic Potion for intellect, and interestingly enough, we can actually farm flame caps with herbalism in Outland, giving us these. No, flame caps do not stack with potions, meaning you can use them independently of any other consumable. I'm assuming that Blizzard haven't actually removed this time in Cataclysm. They didn't previously years ago, and not many people even know this exists. And it is a really good way that you can actually do some more fire damage. The Severed Sagefish Head is going to be your intellect, stamina, food buff, and lastly, the Mythical Healing Potion is the healing potion you'll be using. And that is it, guys. That is how you're going to play Destruction Warlock in Cataclysm Classic. If you have any other questions, queries, or need any other help on the spec, do join the Discord. We've got a really nice community who are very beginner friendly and happy to help. And should you need any extra one-on-one help from me, you can of course join my Patreon, where this will open up a VIP channel in Discord and I can give you some priority support. It also gives you access to written guides, LVI profiles, and spreadsheet access, as well as other behind-the-scenes content on my Patreon as well. And lots of people do watch with ad blockers these days, and especially small gaming creators like me don't make that much on YouTube, and Patreon is a fantastic way to support the channel, making sure I can keep doing videos like this if you do enjoy them. If not, however, no worries, of course, there is a link in the description should you want to, but of course it is not required. And just subscribing and watching these videos does, of course, help out the channel as well. Hopefully you do enjoy them. If you are looking for other spec guides, whether that be for Warlock or other classes, click this playlist here where I've done all of them for you for Cataclysm Classic.